5:17 a.m. The Yellow Sea, 104 nautical miles west of the South Korean port city of Incheon. The water here is shallow by open ocean standards, rarely deeper than 95 meters across the entire basin between the Korean peninsula and the Chinese coast. Warm, turbid with the sediment carried down by the Hwanghae and the Han River, its surface on this morning running a 1-meter chop from the northwest under a sky that is clearing after 2 days of overcast. Temperature 11 degrees Celsius. Wind at 17 knots. Visibility improving, the horizon sharpening as the pre-dawn gray resolves into the first pale light from the Korean mountains to the east. The USS Ronald Reagan, CVN-76, the Nimitz-class carrier of the U.S. Cool 7th Fleet, forward deployed at Yokosuka, holds course at 15 knots on a southwesterly heading, her position placing her at the geographic center of the Yellow Sea at the moment of maximum symbolic significance. A carrier strike group operating freely in waters that the Korean People's Army has explicitly threatened, that the People's Republic of China has repeatedly protested, and that the United States 7th Fleet has transited continuously for 70 years to demonstrate that no navy owns these waters but the laws of the sea. Her air wing, Carrier Air Wing 5, is configured for extended operations. Aircraft fully armed, fuel reserves at maximum, the flight deck crew standing its pre-dawn readiness cycle. Her complement of 5,107 is at heightened alert status. Around her, the cruiser USS Chancellorsville, CG-62, 1 mile ahead, AN/SPY-1A, sweeping without pause. The destroyers USS Curtis Wilbur, DDG-54, and USS Fitzgerald, DDG-62, at the forward quarters, both Aegis baseline 9.C1. The destroyer USS McCampbell, DDG-85, at the stern quarter. The JS Maya, DDG-179, Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force Atago-class guided missile destroyer, running Aegis BMD 5.1 configuration. Positioned 3 miles northeast of the Reagan on the bearing most exposed to North Korean launch trajectories across the Korean peninsula. 5 ships, 5 Aegis systems. The most powerful combined air defense network the Yellow Sea has ever held. Above the formation at 24,000 feet, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye from Carrier Air Wing 5 orbits with its AN/APY-9 radar covering 300 nautical miles in every direction. Its coverage extends into the Korean peninsula, over the demilitarized zone, and 600 kilometers into North Korea. Every vehicle on the roads of South Pyongan Province is a visible radar return at this range and altitude in ground-moving target indicator mode. The Korean People's Army Strategic Rocket Forces had been preparing Operation Iron Lance for 11 weeks. The mission was not a test. It was not a demonstration. It was an operational strike designed to achieve what the KPA's leadership had publicly declared as a strategic objective: the removal of an American carrier from the Yellow Sea through direct military action sufficient to render the ship non-operational. Not a diplomatic protest. Not a missile landing in the water nearby. An actual strike on the Reagan's hull, an event the KPA's supreme leadership believed would force a fundamental revision of American forward-deployed presence in Northeast Asia. The strike package: 16 hwasong 11 GA short-range ballistic missiles, the upgraded KN-23 variant, solid fuel, GPS-corrected terminal guidance, Mach 5 terminal velocity, pull-up and glide maneuver capability in the terminal phase, CEP, assessed at 10 meters at maximum range. The 16 missiles were allocated across 4 TEL batteries in South Pyongan Province, positioned at pre-surveyed launch sites on the Highland Plateau west of Pyongyang. A launch position specifically chosen because its bearing to the Reagan's predicted position in the Yellow Sea was west-northwest, carrying the missiles on a trajectory that overflew no South Korean population centers and minimized the corridor exposure to THAAD batteries deployed at Seongju and Gimcheon. 8 missiles targeted on the Reagan herself, 2 per TL battery, programmed to impact across her flight deck and island structure simultaneously in a 16-second window. 8 missiles targeted on the escorting warships, 2 on Chancellorsville, 2 on Curtis Wilbur, 2 on Fitzgerald, 2 on McCampbell, timed to arrive on their targets within 30 seconds of the carrier impacts. The KPA planners had computed that this configuration, 16 simultaneous high-Mach terminal threats arriving on 5 separate ships within a 50-second window, would overwhelm the combined defensive capacity of the formation by forcing it to assign interceptors to 5 separate simultaneous high-priority tracks, exhausting the per-ship interceptor allocation before all incoming warheads were eliminated. They had modeled the formation's combined defensive capacity as approximately 40 PAC-3 class interceptors, and estimated that 16 inbound KN-23 warheads on a pull-up glide trajectory that compressed the standard ballistic intercept solution would result in a defensive shortfall that allowed 3 to 5 warheads to reach terminal impact. They made 6 catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake: the TEL battery thermal preparation. The 16 Hwasong 11GA missiles were solid fuel weapons that required no liquid propellant loading. But their guidance systems, specifically the inertial navigation unit's gyroscope initialization and the GPS receiver's acquisition of its satellite constellation, required a warm-up sequence of between 12 and 18 minutes at the launcher before launch readiness was achieved. That 12 to 18-minute window, during which the TEL batteries were stationary at their launch sites with their missiles erected and their electronic systems radiating GPS acquisition signals and inertial unit calibration emissions, was visible to the RC-135 V/W Rivet Joint reconnaissance aircraft from Kadena Air Base that maintained a continuous collection orbit over the Korean peninsula at altitude. The Rivet Joint crew characterized the electronic signatures of 4 separate hwasong 11GA guidance initialization sequences beginning at 4:59 a.m., 18 minutes before the planned launch time, and transmitted a launch imminent assessment to the Reagan Strike Group and to Combined Forces Command Korea at 5:03 a.m. The formation had 14 minutes of confirmed pre-launch warning. 14 minutes in which every Aegis system in the formation transitioned to full ballistic missile defense mode, and every intercept solution computation began. The second mistake: the launch plume sequence. 16 Hwasong 11 GA missiles launched in a staggered 4-second sequence from 4 separate TEL battery positions at 5:17 a.m. The SBIRS constellation, acquiring the first launch plume within 2 seconds of ignition, and all 16 plumes classified within 19 seconds. The SBIR's data reached the formation's C-2BMC link at 5:17 a.m. and 7 seconds. 7 seconds after the first missile launched, the formation had the complete picture. 16 tracks, 4 launch positions, computed trajectories, predicted impact points, and time to impact assessments for each of the 16 inbound warheads. The engagement planning was complete before any missile had climbed above 30 kilometers. The third mistake: the JS Maya. The KPA planners had modeled the Yellow Sea Strike Group's ballistic missile defense capacity against the 4 American ships, Chancellorsville, Curtis Wilbur, Fitzgerald, and McCampbell, and had computed a defensible engagement capacity shortfall when the 16 KN-23 warheads were distributed across 5 simultaneous targets. What the KPA operational planning staff had not incorporated was the JS Maya's full engagement capacity in the combined CEC network. The JS Maya carried 32 SM 3-block IB interceptors and was fully integrated into the formation's CEC via the cooperative engagement modifications incorporated in her last refit. She was not a passive participant in the BMD network. She was a full-capacity contributing member of it, with 32 additional interceptors that the KPA model had assigned a 0. The actual combined interceptor capacity of the 5-ship formation was not 40, it was 96. The KPA's capacity calculation was 56 interceptors short of reality. The 4th mistake, the pull-up glide terminal trajectory. The Hwasong 11GA's pull-up glide maneuver in the terminal phase, a capability specifically developed to complicate standard ballistic intercept solutions, was designed to defeat the engagement geometry of SM-2 and PAC-3 systems operating against a standard re-entry vehicle descending on a predictable ballistic arc. The SM-3 Block 2A engages its targets in the mid-course phase, above the atmosphere, on the missile's apogee arc, before any terminal maneuver is possible. The pull-up glide maneuver that was designed to defeat terminal phase intercept systems had no effect on an intercept vehicle engaging the warhead at 400 kilometers altitude above the Yellow Sea, 140 kilometers before the warhead reached the altitude at which its terminal maneuver would initiate. The KPA's most sophisticated terminal maneuvering capability was irrelevant against the intercept layer that was designed to engage it. The 5th mistake, the formation's ASW posture and the submarine factor. The KPA operational plan included a secondary component that the missile strike package was designed to enable, a Type 033 Romeo-class submarine, old by any modern standard, but still capable of launching a heavyweight torpedo against a stationary or maneuvering surface target, had been positioned in the Yellow Sea 40 miles south of the Reagan's predicted position, tasked to fire its forward tubes at the Reagan if the missile strike produced sufficient damage to slow the carrier. The submarine had been in position for 6 days, running at minimum power at 40 meters depth. What the KPA planners had not accounted for was the USS Columbus, SSN 762, a Los Angeles-class fast-attack submarine, which had been conducting independent ASW operations in the Yellow Sea for 11 days and had detected and positively classified the Romeo contact at 4:31 a.m., 46 minutes before the Hwasong 11GA launches. The Columbus had been maintaining a tracking solution on the Romeo since 4:31 a.m. She was waiting for the order. The order would come. The 6th mistake was the most fundamental, and it echoed through every KPA strategic planning document that addressed conflict with American carrier strike groups. The persistent institutional belief that the complexity of a coordinated attack, 16 missiles on 5 targets simultaneously, would produce an engagement outcome governed by the mathematics of saturation rather than the mathematics of a networked defense with deep magazines. The saturation attack is a concept developed to overwhelm a point defense with a finite reaction capacity. The Reagan strike group was not a point defense. It was a networked system with 5 contributing nodes, 96 ready interceptors, and an engagement process that had been running in automatic mode for 14 minutes before the first Hwasong 11GA left its launcher. The complexity of the attack was not an advantage for the attacker. It was a targeting data set that the CEC network had already processed, queued, and begun solving before the first missile cleared its launcher tube. At 5:17 a.m. and 7 seconds, the C-2BMC alert propagates across the formation. All units, Chancellorsville. 16 ballistic tracks confirmed. 4 launch positions, South Pyongan Province. CEC engagement mode, Alpha. JS Maya, BMD assignment, Northeast Sector. All ships, weapons free. The JS Maya fires first. Her SM-3 Block IB interceptors have the optimal geometry against the 4 northeast barren tracks whose trajectories pass through her engagement sector at mid-course altitude. 4 SM-3 Block IB launch from her Mark 41 VLS cells at 5:18 a.m. and 22 seconds, climbing toward their intercept points at 400 kilometers altitude above the Yellow Sea. The SM-3's kinetic vehicle separates from the third stage at 280 kilometers altitude and acquires the inbound hwasong 11GA re-entry vehicles with its long-wave infrared seeker, cold warhead sections against the cold backdrop of space, their thermal signature slightly elevated by aerodynamic heating at the boundary of the upper atmosphere. 4 clean intercepts between 5:21 a.m. and 5:22 a.m. at altitudes between 380 and 420 kilometers. The USS Chancellorsville engages her assigned tracks in parallel. 8 SM-3 Block YB missiles against 8 hwasong 11 GA warheads on the western and southwestern bearing groups, launched in a 14-second ripple beginning at 5:18 a.m. and 31 seconds. The SM-3 interceptors climb at Mach 10 through the upper atmosphere, their third stages positioning the kinetic vehicles for descent into the intercept geometry computed by the CEC network from the SBIRS track data. 6 intercepts between 5:21 a.m. and 5:24 a.m. at altitudes above 350 kilometers. 2 hwasong 11 GA re-entry vehicles on the western axis survive the first Chancellorsville SM-3 salvo. 1 because a trajectory deviation in the missile's second stage burn shifted its mid-course apogee to an altitude marginally outside the first kinetic vehicle's divert capability. 1 because the intercept vehicle's seeker acquisition was delayed by 15 seconds due to a suboptimal approach angle against a warhead with reduced infrared contrast. USS Curtis Wilbur fires 4 SM-6 dual-eye against the 2 surviving western axis warheads as they descend into the upper atmosphere at 410 kilometers altitude. The SM-6 dual-Y in BMD mode, engaging threats at the boundary between mid-course and terminal phase, below the optimal SM-3 engagement band, but above the standard SM-2 engagement envelope. 2 intercepts. Both western axis survivors eliminated at 320 kilometers altitude above the Yellow Sea, 109 seconds before they would have reached pull-up maneuver initiation altitude. No hwasong 11 GA warhead on the western axis reaches terminal phase. The 4 Reagan-targeted missiles, the 2 from each paired battery position aimed at the carrier herself, arriving on near-identical trajectories computed for simultaneous impact across her flight deck, are engaged by the USS Fitzgerald's SM-3 Block IB salvo and the USS McCampbell's SM-6 dual-I backup layer. Fitzgerald fires 6 SM-3 Block IB against the 4 carrier-targeted tracks at 5:18 a.m. and 44 seconds. 4 intercepts at altitudes between 360 and 400 kilometers. All 4 Reagan-targeted warheads eliminated above the atmosphere. None reaches pull-up maneuver altitude. The Reagan's flight deck crew, standing their pre-dawn readiness cycle on the hard stands, feels nothing. 5:23 a.m. and 12 seconds. 6 minutes and 5 seconds since the first Hwasong 11GA ignited in South Pyongan Province. 16 Hwasong 11G A ballistic warheads. 14 intercepted by SM, 3 Block YB above the atmosphere. 2 intercepted by SM-6 Duo La at the mid-course terminal boundary. 0 reached terminal phase. 0 pull-up maneuvers executed. 0 warheads approached the formation. 0 American casualties. 0 JMSDF casualties. USS Ronald Reagan, undamaged. Flight operations continuing on pre-dawn schedule. At 5:23 a.m. and 41 seconds, 29 seconds after the last SM-3 intercept confirmed, the USS Columbus receives her authorization. The Columbus fires 2 Mk-48 ADC-AP heavyweight torpedoes against the Romeo contact at 5:24 a.m. The torpedoes run on active acoustic homing, their seekers acquiring the Romeo's hull noise at 800 meters. Both torpedoes guide to impact at 5:27 a.m. and 32 seconds. The KPA Type 033 Romeo submarine's acoustic signature disappears from the Columbus's towed array. The yellow CASW picture is clear. The strike group commander aboard the Reagan transmits his post-engagement summary at 5:24 a.m. All units, strike group. All 16 ballistic tracks neutralized above the atmosphere. Romeo contact neutralized by Columbus. 0 casualties, 0 damage across all formation ships. Authorized Thunder Lance response. Time-sensitive targets in window. Thunder Lance authorization from Combined Forces Command, Korea, and USFK arrives at 5:26 a.m. At 5:27 a.m., the USS Chancellorsville opens 14 VLS cells. 14 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles launch from the cruiser's forward deck in a 16-second ripple heading east toward the Korean peninsula. USS Curtis Wilbur fires 12 Tomahawks 20 seconds later. USS McCampbell fires 10 at the same interval. USS Fitzgerald fires 9. 45 Tomahawks total. 4 target complexes in South Pyongan Province and the Yellow Sea. Target Complex 1. The 4 Hwasong 11 GATEL battery positions in South Pyongan Province. The SBIRS back computation and RC-135V/W Rivet Joint tracking had placed all 4 battery positions within 50-meter accuracy, and the post-launch dispersal routes of all 16 TEL vehicles had been tracked from their firing positions by the U-2 reconnaissance aircraft from Osan Air Base in South Korea that had been on continuous orbit over the Korean peninsula since 4 a.m. 10 Tomahawks against 4 battery positions, 2 per battery's fixed infrastructure, with 1 additional missile targeting the command vehicle, whose electronic signature had been logged by the Rivet Joint as the coordinating element for all 4 batteries. The TEL vehicles themselves had dispersed. Their launch position infrastructure, the surveyed firing point, propellant support vehicles, and battery-level communications remained. All 4 battery positions struck between 5:44 a.m. and 5:49 a.m. Secondary detonations at 1 position confirm propellant support vehicle contents. Target Complex 2. The KPA Strategic Rocket Forces 2nd Battalion headquarters at Dokcheon in South Pyongan Province. The command node from which Operation Iron Lance had been coordinated. whose communications traffic had been continuously elevated for 72 hours before the launch, as the RC-135V/W logged the coordination pattern between the 4 TEL batteries and the battalion command post. 8 Tomahawks. The communications arrays take the first 2 warheads. The main operations building takes 4 Block 5 penetrating warheads in sequence. The backup command vehicle, at a dispersal position 2 kilometers east of the main facility, takes 2 additional Tomahawks targeted by the U-2's real-time track. The battalion's communication signature goes silent at 5:51 a.m. Target Complex 3. The KPA Coastal Early Warning Radar Network on the western coast of the Korean Peninsula. 3 radar installations whose emissions had been logged by the RC-135V/W as the early warning and tracking support for the Hwasong 11GA launch sequence. 9 Tomahawks, 3 per site. All 3 radar sites struck between 5:46 a.m. and 5:53 a.m. Target Complex 4, dispersed Hwasong 11 GATEL vehicles located on post-launch road movement by U-2 ASARS-2 synthetic aperture radar imagery. 11 TEL vehicles on 6 separate road segments in South Pyongan Province, their thermal signatures visible to the U-2's infrared sensors as recently fired solid fuel launcher motors retained elevated temperature for 40 minutes post-launch. 8 Tomahawks against the 4 highest confidence vehicle locations. 3 vehicles struck on road networks. 1 vehicle struck at a secondary dispersal site near a rail depot. At 5:34 a.m., 8 F-A-18E Super Hornets from the Reagan launch on the Thunder Lance Close Air Support Package, each carrying 4 GBU-39 small-diameter bomb dispensers for flexible targeting of the dispersed TEL vehicles the Tomahawks cannot cover. The F/A-18E strike package reaches South Pyongan Province airspace at 5:51 a.m. and delivers 48 GBU-39 against 7 additional TEL vehicle locations, identified by the U-2's updated ASARS-2 pass, completed at 5:38 a.m. 5 TEL vehicles confirmed as mission neutralized by F/A-18E strike assessment. At 5:41 a.m., 4 F-16CJ aircraft from the 8th Fighter Wing at Kunsan Air Base in South Korea deliver 16 AGM-88E AARGM against 4 additional KPA coastal radar sites on the western Korean coast that activated during the post-launch period, apparently attempting to track American counterstrike aircraft. All 4 silenced between 5:55 a.m. and 6:01 a.m. By 6:04 a.m., 47 minutes after the first Hwasong 11GA launched, the Thunder Lance counterstrike is complete across all 4 target complexes. Battle damage assessment, USFK, and USPACOM. Intelligence at 9 a.m. 16 Hwasong 11 GEO warheads, 0 impacts on any ship, all neutralized above the atmosphere. KPA Type 033 Romeo submarine, neutralized by USS Columbus torpedo engagement, acoustic contact lost at 5:27 a.m. 4 TEL battery positions, all struck, fixed infrastructure destroyed, secondary detonation at 1 position. KPA 2nd Battalion Headquarters, communications destroyed, main building severely damaged, command vehicle at dispersal position struck. 3 KPA coastal early warning radar sites, all struck by Tomahawk. 4 additional radar sites, all silenced by AARGM. 11 dispersed TEL vehicles, 3 confirmed by Tomahawk, 5 confirmed by F/A-18E GBU-39, 3 assessed as probable damage. Hwasong 11. A operational inventory of the 2nd Battalion assessed as reduced by 40 to 60%. Estimated KPA Strategic Rocket Forces personnel casualties 39 to 61. American losses 0 aircraft. 0 ships damaged. USS Ronald Reagan undamaged. Flight operations completed on schedule. 0 American personnel casualties. 0 JMSDF personnel casualties. At 6:09 a.m., the Reagan Strike Group transitions from general quarters to heightened alert status. Flight operations resume at full tempo. The pre-dawn combat air patrol cycle continues on schedule. The first F/A-18E of the morning recovery sequence trapping aboard at 6:14 a.m. as the deck crew cycles through their routine with the calm precision of professionals for whom this morning has been notable but not exceptional. The Aegis systems reload their SM-3 launch cells from the formation's pre-positioned resupply stores. The CEC network continues its watch without interruption. The Yellow Sea holds 17 knots of wind from the northwest and a 1-meter chop. The sun is clear in the Korean mountains to the east, its light crossing the peninsula in a broad orange band that reaches the water ahead of the Reagan's bow. The formation holds its southwesterly course at 15 knots. 5 ships, unscratched, their magazines reloading, their radar sweeping, their crews at their stations. The Korean People's Army had launched 16 ballistic missiles at an American carrier strike group in a sea that American strategy requires to remain open and navigable. The strike group had neutralized all 16 weapons in the first 6 minutes of their flight, before any reached pull-up maneuver altitude, before any entered terminal phase, before any came within 100 kilometers of the formation. The submarine that was waiting to exploit the missile strike's damage found instead that the Yellow Sea contains American submarines, as well as Korean ones, and that an American Los Angeles-class boat is not a platform that a Type 033 Romeo can compete with on any dimension that matters. The Reagan is operational. The Yellow Sea is open. The formation sails on.